Hi, and welcome to Real Nurse Stories. I'm your host, Eva Story, and today we have a really inspiring guest with us. Joining us on the show is Jackson Heilberg, a dedicated nurse who's been on an incredible journey in the world of healthcare. But what makes Jackson's story even more fascinating is that he's not just a nurse, he's also a passionate entrepreneur who's recently founded the Nurse Collective. Jackson's journey into nursing is a testament to the idea that sometimes our paths in life take unexpected turns. And as he reflects on his career, he often thinks, how did I become a nurse? He started with an arts degree, ventured into the world of science, and dabbled in various pursuits. But what he truly yearned for was a profession that would allow him to make a meaningful impact, provide flexibility, and open doors to a diverse range of possibilities. For Jackson, it was more than just a job. It was about a calling to help people and to explore the world. Nursing, or even the idea of becoming a paramedic, crossed his mind, but Jackson fell in love with nursing and never looked back. What makes nursing so fascinating, you may wonder? Well, it's a career filled with endless possibilities. Jackson will share how the nursing profession offered numerous pathways and opportunities. You'll hear about the choices nurses have, whether it's working at the bedside or stepping into leadership or management roles. Nursing is a profession where you can be at the forefront of patient care or driving change from behind the scenes. In our conversation with Jackson, you'll discover how nursing is unique. It's not a one-size-fits-all profession. Instead, there are so many options. We'll explore the remarkable flexibility that nursing offers. So if you're curious about the diverse world of nursing, you're in for a treat. Throughout our chat with Jackson, you'll hear about the different career avenues that nursing can lead you down. Pathways you might not even know exist. We'll delve into healthcare and how nursing in many ways is akin to the world of medicine. It's a field that's filled with opportunities, ripe for those that seek them. Whether you're already a nurse or considering a career in healthcare, this episode is bound to inspire you. So without further ado, let's jump into the world of nursing with Jackson Heilberg and discover the incredible journeys that nurses embark on. Hi, and welcome to Real Nurse Stories. Today, my guest is Jackson Heilberg, who's a nurse, and he's come on the podcast today to talk about his nursing career. So welcome, Jackson, to Real Nurse Stories.
Thank you, Eva. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I know it's taken us quite a time to get to do this, so I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. And Jason is a passionate entrepreneur and has set up also a nurse collective, which I know he's going to talk about today. But for now, I'm going to hand over to you, Jackson, and I'm just going to ask you to start right at the beginning and your journey into nursing, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I guess everyone does choose to become a nurse for different reasons. For me, I've been asked this question before and I've had to think about it because when I reflect back, it's like, oh wow, I'm somehow a nurse now, but I don't actually know how the journey got there. For me, I wanted a career. Before nursing, I did an arts degree and a science degree, and I dabbled in a few things. And for me, I really wanted a job that allowed me to do a few things. And I've said this before, but allowed me to help people, allowed me to have flexibility and a career that is so diverse. I thought about paramedics. For me, a career that allowed me to travel, a career that allowed me to help people and to have variety, to have the option to try different things.
Mm.
And I guess not to be bored.
Yeah.
But I guess at its core essence, I wanted to be able to help people, which I know sounds, everyone says that, but
Mm.
for me, the option was paramedics or nursing, and my intent was to do nursing and then transfer to paramedics. But I've fallen in love with nursing, and here we are. And it's a really cool career that has so many amazing avenues.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've interviewed a lot of nurses for my podcast, and it's interesting how many kind of go into nursing thinking they're going to go into be a paramedic, or sometimes vice versa. They go and be a paramedic and then decide to go into nursing. And there's that definite kind of thought process there. But
Yeah.
what fascinates me is, people who are going into nursing thinking they'll be a paramedic invariably don't get that far because they decide, that they actually love nursing. And as you say there's so many different avenues, particularly now, that you can go into as a nurse. There's so many different career pathways, and I think it's full of opportunities in that sense.
No, exactly right. I think, it's not right or wrong either way.
No.
Nursing's definitely not for everybody. And if, I know many nurses who have become paramedics and love that transition, and they dabble in nursing. And I've got friends who are paramedics who, for them, they've reached their career goals in paramedics and now have transitioned to nursing, more so in the critical care space, something that they weren't really able to attain through paramedics.
Yeah.
And, they love that journey. So I guess that's the beauty of healthcare, I guess, more broadly. But nursing is unique, probably more akin to medicine, in the fact that there is a lot more flexibility, not only in regards to being able to travel state borders and globally without, the bureaucracy that maybe other professions have, but also the ability to have a bedside career, have a leadership and management career, have an operations career, have, there's so many, there's, through interviewing people with the nurse break, I have learned about careers that I did not know existed.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
So where did you do your training, Jackson?
Yeah, so I did the postgraduate entry to nursing. It's called the Masters of Nursing practice at Monash University in Victoria.
Okay. And then when you qualified, where were you thinking you were going to head when you kind of finished your training?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I chose to do nursing was because I was meeting all these amazing men and women who were nurses and paramedics in St. John Ambulance, Victoria. So for me, definitely I was drawn to the emergency critical care field. I really wanted an emergency graduate year, which I didn't get. I got my first preference at the Alfred Hospital. I got trauma orthopedics and general medicine. And in hindsight, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, not getting an emergency graduate, because it really did consolidate those core sort of gen med nursing skills. And I guess a lot of emergency patients end up on the gen med ward. So it's, I've dabbled in that, and even since then, I've done the occasional casual shift. So I think, my grad year was at the Alfred, and then I moved to Monash Health in Victoria, which is a massive health service. I think it's one of Australia's largest health services via staff levels. And that's sort of how it all sort of began. And now I'm in the Northern Territory.
But that's the beauty of it, like you say, isn't it? You can move around and go wherever it takes you and experience all these great things. So, that's the cool thing, I think, about being a nurse.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you kind of fall into entrepreneurship then? Because you were obviously, trauma orthopedics, you sound like you really enjoyed that. So where did the entrepreneurship start to come in?
I don't know. And someone asked me the other day where it came from, and I answered with out of frustration. And I think that probably is it. I was frustrated in the fact that, so there's sort of two things I've created. One is the Nurse Break, and then the Nurses Collective is a more newer thing. But the Nurse Break, the entire thing about it is interviewing nurses, and exactly what we're doing right now, and showcasing their careers. And I think the frustration that led to me doing that was there's a lot of misconceptions, and there definitely was then, about the role of a nurse.
Yeah.
I was meeting as a student on my placements and as a grad, but primarily as a student. I was meeting these amazing nurse educators at the Alfred, for example, and I was like, if I don't interview about your career or we
Yeah.
talk about you, no one's ever going to hear your story, like,
Yeah.
at a much sort of broader scale. And, a few people were like willing to talk about their journey in nursing and how they've ended up to where they are today. And it was definitely aimed at students initially, but I think within about 3-4 months, people in Australia, especially nurses, really want to know about what all the different professions are, what our colleagues in other states are doing. And I think that's why there are so many really interesting nurses running podcasts, such as this one here, because you get to meet these inspiring people. And that's definitely what I've been able to do is interview the most amazing careers from people, nurses, doctors, paramedics, and a mixture of all three.
It is fascinating because slightly different reasons to you for starting this podcast, but I wholeheartedly agree with what you say. We don't have an up-to-date media presence, I don't think, that represents modern day nursing. I think, particularly members of the public are not aware that nursing is so broad, so vast, and there's lots of many different avenues and roles that nurses can go into. I also think for anybody thinking about coming into nursing, perhaps may not also be aware of that. So I think, interviewing nurses about their careers and, why they do what they do is hugely important. My kind of purpose for setting up the Real Nurse Stories came about from some of the work that I do as a coach and the reluctance to talk about sometimes some of the difficulties in nursing, such as, the stress, the overwhelm, the burnout. And I was trying to think of ways, that I could kind of tap into that without being so direct and leading. And what's fascinating for me is with a lot of the people, the nurses that I've interviewed, nearly all of the stories have some element of a stressful time, how they dealt with that or didn't deal with it. And I think, it's a great medium, podcasts, for educating and helping people to understand things. So I share that passion with you, Jackson, because I think we need to be doing more of this.
And
you go.
I guess I've learned a lot through interviewing people, and in particular, I've learned about what, and I can only talk to my own experience, but the things that I wasn't told prior to joining. And I'm talking everything from the occupational violence through to like, I don't necessarily like the word burnout, but burnout, and there's so many other sort of systemic issues that cause stress in the healthcare system. And I think I now think that potentially my university, not mine, but universities potentially, and the system more broadly, does a disservice to people considering healthcare careers, when they don't understand the full context of what they're getting into. And don't get me wrong, nursing and paramedics and medicine are, and I can only speak to nursing, are, it is a really good profession, but I think people need to have maybe more realistic expectations about what the role is. And the only way to do that is by interviewing people doing the job currently. What is the role of a stonewall nurse or a wound care nurse or a palliative care nurse practitioner or a nurse working for Doctors Without Borders? The jobs are not comparable, but there are similarities, and I think that's the importance of what we are both doing. So,
and I think it's also, isn't it? It's about going in with eyes wide open. I think personally, that's sometimes where our education of nurses, student nurses, falls down, because we don't always tackle some of those difficult issues and give a realistic sense of what it's like to, you know, be newly qualified on a ward and that feeling like I don't know what I don't know, because it's a totally different world. And I don't, some respects it is getting better, but it's slow, and it's still, I don't think, equipping new nurses with the skills that they actually need to navigate some of the issues, you know. And you've mentioned there the workplace violence issues, you know, which is a big issue, and it's not talked about very much, you know. So if you're going to come across that, it's a huge shock, can be, you know. And the other thing I think I was going to say to you, Jackson, is I think frustration is a really good motivator for setting up a business,
apparently
because
so.
you know, in all honesty, it's like nurses are innovative, they're hugely practical, and that frustrates me that people don't go and ask nurses enough, you know, what are your ideas for a solution, you know, because we have some fabulous ideas, but we're not always asked about them, or there isn't always a mechanism to feed that up.
To be at that decision
table.
table.
Yeah. And I think frustration is a great motivator for being an entrepreneur. And, you know, I think the work that you're doing is very much needed. And I'd like to invite you, Jason, just to elaborate a little bit more on your the Nurse Collective. And I know that that's kind of graduated a bit from the nurse break, but can you just talk us through, you know, how that works and what nurses can gain from joining the Nurse Collective?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd probably just quickly start with anyone interested in entrepreneurship. I think there's a really cool book, and it's called The Lean Startup. A book worth reading. But so the frustration for Nurses Collective, I guess, was there are multiple. Nursing is fragmented online. There's hundreds of Facebook groups, mostly poorly moderated. And then our student associations at universities have, some of them have, you know, Instagram pages and student societies that are active, and the others don't, or the leadership doesn't get handed over between the student presidents. And then our professional colleges, our nursing peak bodies, they charge a fee that they need to, but they don't offer a community to their members. A good majority of them don't. There is some that do offer like a forum or a group, but the majority don't. And those that do, it's often on these really old school sort of clunky systems that once again adds to this further fragmentation of nursing. So Nurses Collective is, in the simplest terms, a collective, a hub that brings our student associations, our professional colleges, and general community practices into one space, in collaboration with heaps of healthcare organizations to bring resources to one spot as well. So the journey could be, you're a student and you are in a student group on the platform and you're interested in palliative care nursing. So you join the palliative care nurses group. And then one day you become, you know, and also you're in a student society. So your university is on the platform. And then one day you become a nurse practitioner. And the Australian College of Nurse Practitioners is one of the organizations that uses this nationwide for all their NPs as of a few weeks ago. And it's about having everything in one spot while maintaining while those organizations maintain their own sort of independence for their own brand and identity and membership, because these groups are private. But it puts everything in one spot, and it's something that I wish, and I know a lot of people wish existed, rather than just having to go through pretty spammy Facebook groups. It's primarily the only option. So that's at its simplest terms what it is.
And that's taken a huge amount of work, Jackson. You know, I know that, because it's not easy to do these things, and you have to be really dedicated to be able to get a massive project, because it is really, it's a national project, isn't it? You know, to establish that and to get, you know, the different organizations to support it.
Mm.
How is it going? Because how long is it now since you launched it?
Well, look, I did a proof of concept in January, and hundreds of people joined then, and I was like, oh God, okay, I should
Yeah,
really kickstart this. So I actually only launched it in October, so a few weeks ago,
yeah,
and yeah, look, my plan is for it to domino slowly over a period of 12 months and then onwards until people understand that, well, firstly, it's free,
yeah, yeah,
funded effectively by major sponsors.
yeah,
Currently it's Osmed, eNurse, and Bank First. Most nurses
yeah,
know those organizations. Um, and slowly getting student associations and our professional colleges on board, which, we've currently got the Australian College of Nurse Practitioners,
yeah,
and there's a whole bunch of other ones that are actually extremely keen to get on board. So
yeah,
I would advocate for people to just check it out. It takes 30 seconds
yeah,
to register. I think yourself is on it as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
But
that's true. I am.
and yeah, like it's a work in progress, but I think it's going to be really, people are really going to find it useful. And it's community led. So, if
Yeah,
people want to get involved and, play around with those sort of side hustle vibes that they have in their own lives, and they want
mm,
to learn some tech, and they want to, you know, become a facilitator, and
mm,
be part of something really cool and exciting, then yeah, I'm expressions of interest are open, and there's some really cool senior nurses getting on board already. So
yeah,
that's really cool.
yeah. And I think it's, you know, it's very telling, isn't it, that when you kind of had the proof of concept, you were inundated, which tells you there's a need for that, very much
Mm.
so. Um, and I think it's great that you got the sponsorship as well. How easy was it to get that?
Um, so for so I think so. Generally speaking, which is probably a good sign, is that effectively the sponsors sort of pitched me rather than me asking for
Right.
sponsors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm extremely picky because I don't want um, anyone to be a sponsor. And
Mm,
I have rejected organizations because they
yeah.
need to align with
Yeah.
my values of the nurses collective, and also the values that are of the nursing profession. And
Yeah.
they need to respect and understand nurses and our journey. So the organizations I've picked are Osmed, eNurse, and Bank First.
Mm,
They do that. Everyone knows that they do that. They're well renowned. And yeah, so you'll see them on the app. Where if you when you download it from the App Store, you'll see their logo on the website or the app.
yeah. I mean, I just think it's a great initiative. And have you had feedback from people who've joined? Have you had, or it's probably a bit too early for that, maybe?
Yeah. Look, people are generally speaking, like, I have received quite a bit actually, and people are amazed. They're actually primarily they're excited to see what it becomes.
Yeah.
Um, but we're at 2,000 or 2,100
Yeah.
registered users as of 2 weeks. And, I think when this becomes 3 and 4 and 10,
Yeah.
it'll become a really professional platform that isn't connected to people's social media, and will
Yeah.
become an option that isn't Facebook, and a free option
Yeah.
that effectively gives you a professional fusion of LinkedIn and
Yeah.
Facebook for nursing in your phone, in your
Yeah.
hand.
Which
So,
is great, isn't it? It's because there isn't anything like that at all.
no, exactly right.
Yeah. So what is the future? What's your vision for it, Jackson? Where do you see it going?
I just want it to become a place that nursing students and everyday nurses go to connect and network professionally,
Mm,
other than Facebook. And I want it to become a place that is transparent, moderated, safe,
mm,
and something that we definitely haven't had, and something that's been needed for a long time,
yeah.
and really user friendly. And I think I don't want it to be nationwide, and
Yeah.
that's definitely my first goal.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, you are going to need more than you to achieve that, aren't you? Because I'd imagine that's a lot of hours of work to, already actually to get to where you are. So is that something that you envisage in the future, that you're going to have a bigger team?
Yeah, currently the power of AI and good time management has
Yeah.
definitely allowed me to get to where it is, and having an amazing like app developing like a development team sort of
Yeah.
back there. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities for nurses,
Yeah.
especially those with like an actual skill set or a passion to get involved. Absolutely.
Mm. And where can nurses how do they find you, Jackson? How do they find the Nurse Collective?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find me just on LinkedIn, primarily sort of the best option, or through
Yeah.
Nurses Collective. So you just Google nursescollective.org. And yeah, you can get involved. You'll probably see colleagues and fellow
Yeah.
students and people and your lecturers on there. And yeah, you can just connect through me
Yeah.
through that or LinkedIn.
Yeah. All right, that's great. And I really look forward to seeing where this is going to go, because I know I have joined and I kind of watched the development of this, and I just think it's a really great initiative because, as you say, there is, everything is in one place. And I have a bit of an aversion to Facebook because I don't like the way that it's going, and I don't like the whole algorithm thing. And I think
Yeah.
we're not doing it for that. We're trying to reach nurses and support and make a difference, and it's a great platform to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, that's the vision, and I think people can see it,
Yeah.
and it'd be great to have more people come on that journey.
Yeah. I just want to come back a little bit, Jackson, to one of the things that you mentioned in your questionnaire that you wanted to talk about, and it's around the difficulties of nursing. And you mentioned that misunderstanding of the role and violence in healthcare and workload. And I just want the opportunity just for you to expand on that a little bit, because all of those issues are huge in nursing, and just kind of why that's important and why that you feel that's the most difficult part of being a nurse.
Yeah, like I don't know if it's the most difficult, and everyone's journey and experiences is different. However, I think it's an area that is being dealt with at a sort of organizational and national level. But I do think that there is so many stories that aren't reported of nurses being attacked verbally and physically, and it either goes underreported or it's poorly managed.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like a lot of people that I know personally have been supported in those journeys. And I think for me, 2 years ago, myself and my mate from the archive, we released a really cool mini series that went quite viral, and it interviewed nurses on camera, sort of in like ABC sort of style, you know their experiences with violence. And some of the stories were like atrocious.
Yeah.
Nurses getting effectively stabbed, watched and stalked on their way out of the car parks home from predators. Very mentally unwell people who were doing that. Through to just the everyday assaults and verbal abuse that you get in aged care, emergency, on the wards, in the community. And I just think it needs to be spoken about more. I think we need to have louder voices on this topic, because we shouldn't be getting attacked. We shouldn't have paramedics getting killed.
No.
We shouldn't have nurses and doctors getting killed and attacked.
No.
And we've had that this year and last year and every year. And also in our remote communities as well, it's a taboo to talk about. There is a lot of violence that healthcare workers experience in certain areas across Australia. And there's many causes of this violence that people experience, that also needs to be understood. But I think just the personal journey that nurses go through needs to be explored a bit deeper. And so that's sort of that where that comes from.
How was that met? Because I know to talk about some of these things, it's very organization specific in terms of some organizations are really not kind of permitting people to talk about these experiences, which makes it more of a taboo subject. It's not, you referenced there, it's not kind of always out in the open. And how did you manage that, Jackson, in terms of interviewing people about that?
Yeah, so it's a tricky one. These were nurses primarily all very extremely experienced, and they preferred to give their story out than deal with the repercussions. However, we got all their employers' approval to do it, which made it far easier. However, there are nurses in certain parts of Australia who are effectively gagged, to not explore what they're experiencing. And it's not just nursing.
No.
But yeah, there's a whole world out there of untold stories. And yeah, that's my little passion project to go find those clinicians and interview them. And we can do that alongside you as well.
Because I think a lot of people would be shocked by that. When I say people, I mean members of the public. I think a lot of that, because it is hidden, it's not really, you don't see a lot of that reported, that people don't always appreciate, what nurses are subjected to. And it's becoming more and more an issue. It has been for a while, there's lots.
And yeah, exactly. And it's not just, emergency departments. It's aged care, facilities. It's community. And most reporting is about our emergency departments, but nurses on a hourly basis in some places deal with it day to day. So
and I think that's really sad, because there's lots of contributing factors that can affect nurses from a stress point of view. And I think burnout is a very overused word at the moment, but the consequences of true burnout can be a combination of significant events that somebody has experienced. And I don't think we do a great job at supporting people with that. It's the kind of statutory, well, there's EAP, but that's not really in this context sufficient help to kind of help somebody navigate that process. And I say this all the time, Jackson, but we can't afford to lose good nurses. And if somebody experienced, violence in healthcare, that can be the end of their career, because we don't get people back sometimes. Understandably.
Exactly. And it has, lifelong ramifications. There is an organization across Australia called the National or the Nurses Midwifery Program, through the NMHVP, currently in Victoria. But there are hotlines out there dedicated to nurses and midwives that those resources can be found on the Nurses Collective. And it's all there, anyone to access. But for those who are struggling with stuff, it doesn't just have to be EAP and our other hotlines. There's actually dedicated nurse and midwifery service across Australia that's been set up. But yeah, those resources are on the website. But and we can put it in the show notes as well. But yeah, it's definitely an area that I wasn't taught as a student, and I actually didn't really experience it as a student on placement either. But yeah, so yeah, that's just
so it's, I mean, I know a lot of healthcare organizations do put their staff through mandatory training now in terms of how to deal with that type of conflict. But I think it's still, there's still those incidents where healthcare staff get caught up inadvertently sometimes, because of the difficulties of the patients that they're dealing with. And it's something that's a real issue, sadly.
Yeah, and I don't think you could eradicate violence and aggression in healthcare because, there are many causes of it, organic, not organic, and, a lot of unmet needs and, pathological reasons and medical reasons, etc. And, sundowning is a perfect example of just, it more comes down to a lot of these things is recognizing it early and coming up with strategies to manage it, recognize it, and mitigate it safely without it ending in an incident. But
Jackson, can you kind of share a little bit about some of the challenges or a challenging time that you've had in your career and what you learnt as a result of that?
Oh, that's a tricky question. You'll have to get back to that question.
All right. I mean, perhaps thinking more in terms of, I know you mentioned your grad kind of ambition was to go into emergency critical care, but you actually ended up in trauma orthopedics. And I just wonder, for grads who are listening to this, because we've kind of gone through that whole process again recently for grads applying for places, and it's a stressful time, isn't it, for grads? Because you go.
No, 100%. Sorry for interrupting. I think the grad process is extremely stressful, and they're not supported sometimes, depending on where you are, for expectation management. And I think if you go in with a fresh set of eyes and willing to learn and realize that it's just 12 months, if you get a grad year, and it's not the end of the world if you don't, your career has got a long way to go. And just because you don't get what you want, that you wanted for the last 3-4 years in your first year, is not the end of the world. And it's all about how you frame the experience that you've been given, and it'll open doors that you didn't see and expect, and you might even end up loving it.
And I from the stories that have come out of the interviews with the nurses that I have interviewed, there is a common theme throughout a lot of those stories, kind of go where it takes you in your career, because you never know what opportunity that's going to open up for you. And it is a leap of faith. Sometimes you do have to think, well, okay, maybe not what I wanted, but let's give it a go. And it's being open to that possibility, isn't it, that can really kind of end up being a really rewarding career in an area that you might never have considered.
Yeah, exactly. So don't shut the door too quickly.
No. And I think, listening to, the people who you've interviewed, and also like podcasts like mine, and there's other people who are also interviewing nurses, to listen to those. If you're a grad and you're, wondering where to from here, and you are, perhaps didn't get the area that you wanted, have a listen to some of these stories, because it can really give you a sense of, I hadn't thought about that, and I can think of an example. Somebody I interviewed as a nurse working in a rural area in mental health, and she said mental health was never on her radar. I think she wanted to go into ED and ended up taking this job, literally packing up a car and working in some remote part of Western Australia, and absolutely loved it.
100%. And what a tiny example for me is I'm a nurse immunizer, tiny part of currently what I do, but I didn't think I'd ever do that. It just sort of just happened. And, it's in itself, it's opened some really cool opportunities in primary healthcare that has actually really started to interest me. And has actually complemented my emergency sort of skill set. That is definitely got a long way to go in itself. But so it's, if you just a little bit of going with the flow, a little bit of and I think you still actively plan your career to a point. it's good to have sort of a scaffold, a framework to go by. And I think LinkedIn and Nurses Collective are two sort of platforms that
Yeah.
will allow you to look at what other people are doing and how they got there,
Yeah.
and link in with them. And
Yeah. Yeah. And I can relate that to my career. I've been a nurse for a very long time, and I have literally, if I look back, I would never in a million years have thought when I was a younger nurse that I would have ended up doing some of the jobs that I did.
yeah.
Because they were literally, I had no experience at all in some of these things, but hey, they needed someone to do it. So I'm like, well, why not? And it led to so many things that I would never ever have had those opportunities had I not been open to learning something new. And I think I always have a saying, I say you should never go back to a job that you've left, as in the same job.
Yeah.
You should only ever go forward into something different, because you take the skills with you along the way and you carry those forward into your next role, and it goes on until you've got this kind of like almost a portfolio of experience that you've gained along the way. Because I think that's what it's about, really.
No, 100%. There's just so many options out there that you
Yeah.
don't even know exist.
So kind of I've got a couple of last questions for you here, Jackson, but one of the things I wanted to ask you, and I always ask everybody when I interview this question, is kind of knowing what you know. And I know that you said you'd been qualified in a relatively short time, but you've still done a lot in that short time, so this is still very relevant. What advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out in their nursing career?
It would be, there'd be a few points.
Mm-hmm.
Really focus on consolidating and becoming a safe nurse, as like a priority, especially like when you're starting out, and obviously always, but focus on consolidating those skills to make sure you're safe.
Yeah.
Advocate for your patients, and when you feel like something or something's wrong,
Yeah.
And do it, using graded assertiveness, which is a whole concept you can Google if you aren't sure about what it is, because it can save someone's life potentially. Graded assertiveness. Thirdly is, I'm not the right person to say this, but like you've got a long career ahead of you, so just dabble in different things and explore, and don't lock yourself into one area. And probably the fourth one would be like network and like meet lots of different people, find a community, and get involved in the broader profession, because it might really complement your work-life balance in a surprising way.
What does a safe nurse look like, Jackson? Because I'm conscious we use these terms, but to somebody listening, what does it mean?
I would describe it as knowing. So I guess you have the scale of competence and confidence, and it's about being and having enough self-awareness that you know that you might not know something, or that you don't know something, rather than being being completely blind to the fact that you don't know something. And it's just about asking questions and trying to remain humble and not having to know everything. I think the other fifth thing that I would add to my list would be like treat students well. I was treated atrociously by some people. And I wish I had responded to them differently in hindsight. But I've on a few occasions like pulled up colleagues for like speaking to students. And it's not, you don't realize necessarily how your words come across, but sometimes your friend or a colleague might be like, hey, that probably wasn't cool, that nurse is now crying, the nurse student's now crying. And I've seen it a few times where I'm probably guilty of as well, where we're in a situation and we say something, and it can get misinterpreted, or it's just not a nice thing to say to someone who's learning. Because if you're not the person to take a student, and it's not your day for a student, you need to like speak up, because the students are the people who need our support, and they need to feel supported, and they need to be treated as students, not just as a second pair of hands to just do all the tasks. You need to you need to precept them well, because they have limited time on placement.
And I think that's hugely important, Jackson, because I have a real kind of frustration, if you like, about how we talk to not necessarily just students or grads. I've heard other nurses talk to nurses who might be new into a role,
or agency staff,
etc. And there's that saying, isn't it? The standard you walk past is the standard that you
accept.
And I think as a profession, we do have to do some kind of reflection on how we treat our own in the profession. I think we don't always utilize emotional intelligence. We don't always think about the message and how best to say it, because everybody's different and we need different approaches when we communicate with people. I think grads have a hard time navigating that in their first ward post qualifying. And one of the things I always say, I did a presentation masterclass not so long ago about this, and we were talking about choosing your wizards wisely. How do you know who to go to on a ward, first day on a ward? And it's very simple. It's you observe, you watch who everybody else goes to. Who are the go-to people?
Don't get involved in gossip. Ears open, mouth closed when it comes to gossip.
Absolutely don't. And never ever be afraid to ask questions, because that's how you learn. And I think we have a lot of work to do in creating a culture that's kind. And we can be our own worst enemies sometimes. I think as a profession, we put people through this baptism of fire, maybe because that's how they had to learn, but that doesn't mean that's how we have to learn going forward. There's better ways of doing it. So
no, I think you put it perfectly.
I think it's a really important, those points that you've shared there, because it's hugely difficult, hugely challenging as a grad. And it's often, the other thing I say to people, it's about choosing. You're testing out. It might be that you don't particularly like that area. That's okay. You can then go and choose something else. It's about being selective and learning what you like and what you don't like. And the first place you go may not be the place that you really want to be in the future, and that's okay.
And I'd have to give one extra thing that just came to my mind. My sixth tip to students and grads is to document whatever you're doing right now. Document more. And go read some coroner's cases. They're free and able to be accessed by anybody. I strongly advocate students and grads, and I wish I had read them, because the moment I started reading I went on this wormhole one night recently, and I started reading coroner's cases, and the in-depthness that they go to in regards to the nursing notes and the actions or inaction of certain individuals is mind-boggling. And it definitely has made me cognizant that I need to document far more comprehensively than I thought I already was. So I would strongly advocate for people to read up on that, because that'll make you more comprehensive in your nursing assessments as well when you start thinking about other things.
It will. And I think I had an experience that was a massive learning curve for me many years ago. I worked as a theatre nurse, and this was quite a long time, kind of after I'd moved on. I was doing something completely different, and I got a letter that dropped through the letterbox. This was when I was in the UK, from one of the big law firms in the UK where I was working, and I opened this letter, and the only bits that jumped out at me was, "It appears you were the nurse."
Yeah, that's heart
Oh
dropping, right? You're like,
my
oh God.
God. I can't tell you the panic that caused, because
Yeah,
I'm looking at this name. I don't know who it is. I can't remember.
yeah,
And it was a huge learning curve. It was nothing kind of serious in that regard. It was basically they wanted a confirmation of an entry in a theatre book where you record the patient details. But it was a huge kind of reminder about, this was many years later, how things can come back to you and you don't remember because you've looked after thousands of people in that period of time.
exactly. And if I was to give a specific example, for me, it's about every conversation I have with a doctor, verbal or phone.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I would have a quick little conversation in the corridor about the patient's progression or something, and then they would say
Yes.
something. And I wouldn't necessarily always write those down,
No.
you know, contemporaneously, I guess,
Yeah.
or the word,
Yeah.
whatever the word is,
Yeah.
you know. And now I do. Now I
Yeah.
actively write down every conversation, every phone call. If there's a visitor in the room, I'll write
Yeah.
down that there's a visitor in the room and what time, just because of certain experiences I've had that I wish I had.
Yeah.
And it would have covered me in a few situations, and if you and I think it's really important that, you know, you know, it's up to you if you do it or not, but
Yeah.
it'll be you having to explain.
Yeah.
So if you're confident in your documentation,
Yeah.
when you look back at it, if you ever get pulled up, you'll be confident that exactly what you wrote is
Yeah.
everything that happened that
Yeah.
shift. So
And equally, I also can remember going on a documentation course that was run by a retired barrister, and part of this course was a mock-up of an actual court proceeding, and we all had to take turns and stand in the witness box, and he assassinated our character, every single one of us, one by one. And he explained, it's like, he said, it's like a theatre. He said, you go into that witness box, you're being judged on how you look, how you speak. They see you as a professional, you're a nurse. And he said, they refer to your records and there's missing information. Well, if it's not documented, it wasn't done.
Yeah, or
And
if you don't do it then, but how
yeah,
do we know we trust your notes
yeah,
now? So
yeah.
yeah,
You call yourself a professional, but you don't keep contemporaneous notes. It was
yeah,
like, I came out of there thinking I'll just have to write essays from now on
yeah,
forever. Because, I don't think we truly, unless you've had an experience where you've been exposed, you either had to go to court to give evidence or you've been involved in something, like
a coroner's or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we really genuinely truly understand the importance of documentation, and it's such an important thing. I 100% agree with you. It's like,
Yeah, that'd be my 6 points. I'll add no more, I promise.
oh, it's been lovely talking with you, Jackson. And I just honestly, I think the work that you're doing with, the Nurse Collective is such a great initiative, and I think it's really, really needed. And I'm excited to see where that goes, because that there's so many possibilities around that, even beyond Australia, dare I say, because there's nothing really that's doing what you're doing, and Facebook isn't the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for your kind words.
No, I genuinely mean that. And my final question for you, and it's probably, I'm going to ask you anyway, because I know you say, well, you've still got a long career to go, but what would you most like to be remembered for in your career?
Just being just being oh, that's a tricky question. Haven't been asked that one before. I think just doing as long as I try to do my best, is, remembered for creating a community that people use. And yeah, I can't really answer that just yet. Yeah.
I think you're very modest, Jackson, because I think from everything we've talked about today, I think that's probably, one of the things that you will look back and have a lot of pride about the work that's gone into the Nurse Collective and how that will grow. And I realize it's very early days, but I think it has the potential to be something that I think in the future you'll be really proud of.
Mm. Yeah, well, let's hope so. I'm confident it will. So
I'll have to interview you in 10 years and ask you the question again.
let's do it.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jackson, for your time today. And maybe if you can just drop me some notes and I can put them in the show notes for how people can find you.
Yeah, no,
And
absolutely.
we'll go from there.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for chatting today.
You're welcome. You're welcome.